Today we're going to break down the gist of each Keyforge house. Welcome to HiveState. So last week I posted a little overview and first impressions for Keyforge, and this week I'm taking it one step further. I'm going to be diving into each house and giving the gist of how each house plays. I'm not going to, or at least I'm going to try to not ramble too awful much, but we're going to get started with Brobnar. Out of all of the houses, this one definitely seems the most fight-oriented. There are even quite a few cards that allow other houses to fight while you're playing as Brobnar. And on top of being able to beat down cards just by fighting, there's also quite a few cards in this house that just allow you to deal strict damage to your opponent or your opponent's creatures. It becomes pretty easy to weaken down the cards that you don't want on the field and picking them off. If you like brutality in combat, this is a house you might hope to play. The next thing we'll talk about is pretty much a polar opposite. Instead of beefy fighters, we're having scientists and technical cards. We're of course talking about House Logos. If you want to have a deck with a good bit of draw power, you'll definitely want to be playing a deck with Logos in it. There are quite a few great draw cards in this house. The other mechanic is archiving cards. When used correctly, being able to archive cards in this game is so powerful. It's so easy to set up some combos when you can store away cards for later turns and choose exactly when to draw them back into your hand. Now, once you look past the two core mechanics, Logos is kind of a bit random and technical. However, one of my favorite cards in the game is from Logos, and that's Wild Wormhole. If you're familiar with Kaijudo, it's a lot like Bottle of Wishes, but less overpowered. Let's move on to Shadow. Now, Shadow is the most technical and combat-heavy house in this game, in my humble opinion. Basically, a lot of the creatures are very lackluster whenever it comes to power, but they make up for it quite a bit with some really nice abilities and being elusive. On top of being hard to hit, they also really like to take what you worked for. Many of their actions have cheeky ways to steal amber, which, I mean, in this game, it's usually better to steal than to earn, so, well, good things come to those who know how to find them. So to sum up House Shadows, if you like to take things that aren't yours, or, I don't know, have your creatures be kind of a pain to get rid of, or even if you're someone who likes to find cheeky little combos, you may want to play a deck with House Shadow. So we're at the midway house, and we are talking about my favorite house now, which is House Sanctum. Now, Sanctum is filled with pretty much the knights of the world. Their creatures are a bit beefier and they're defensive, some in different ways than others. The best way I feel I can put it is that they're very offensively defensive. They also have some great ways to capture or gain amber pretty quickly. And the captured amber is often held for quite a bit of time due to the defenses of some of your creatures. And on top of this, you can even get a deck with the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse in this house. Granted, I think that these are just a little bit overrated. I mean, if you got a deck with maybe like 2 playsets of the 4 Horsemen or a Maverick 4 Horsemen deck, I'd be interested, but I don't know. I just find a normal one kind of boring. Next, we're going to Mars, because aliens exist. Now, Mars cards are very team-oriented, kind of. A lot of them work with how many Mars cards you have. The more you have, the bigger and better effects they have. But you see, they're also pretty good at something else. Mars has a few cards that are good to help delay your opponent in forging keys. And I mean, any turn you can delay or deny your opponent a key is a very good turn. Personally, I really like Mars. They can be a bit finicky depending on what deck they're in. But they're so fun to play. They even have some cards that'll archive your opponent's creatures into your archive, and that's just, it's so thematic. Moving from Martians to demons, we're gonna talk about Dis. Dis is dark and controlling. This house has so many ways to just do things like tell your opponent how many cards they can play in a turn. You can steal some of your opponent's creatures, or you can even tell your opponent what house they're gonna be playing next turn. On top of all this, Dis is also filled with ways to destroy or even purge the creatures on the field. Granted, sometimes it's your own creatures being harmed, but gotta break a few eggs, right? All in all, this is one of the most well-rounded houses in my opinion. The creatures are normally pretty decent, and if I see this in a deck, I'm normally okay with it. They can play quite a few parts. Well, we are at our last faction, and this faction is Untamed. Untamed seems to be the most in tune with Amber. There's an overflow of it. So much so that some of your cards even give your opponent Amber, which, I mean, normally seems like it'd be a bad thing, but here, well, why not? Untamed also has quite a few larger creatures in their house that can be a bit of a pain to fight through. And not only are the creatures large, they often have pretty good abilities to boot. Granted, the opposite is also true. Untamed has quite a few creatures and abilities that easily make it good to go wide and have quite a bit on your field. It's a really solid house. So that about wraps up this week's video. I am thinking about pulling in some friends and doing a full Call of the Archons set review. If that's something you're interested in, let me know. I'm more than happy to do it. Not sure what's planned for next week, but if you want to find out, go ahead and subscribe and hit that bell. That way you know when it's posted. But whether you do or whether you don't, you'll see me when you see me.